There is a quiet fear many women carry but rarely name: the fear of asking for what they need. The fear of being seen as too much, too emotional, too demanding, or difficult. So instead of speaking, they soften their voice. They minimize their needs. They wait. They hope someone will notice without being told. And over time, that silence becomes exhaustion. If you have ever felt guilty for expressing yourself, afraid of conflict, or anxious that honesty might push people away, this audiobook is for you. Because the problem is not that you ask for too much. The problem is that you were never taught how to communicate your needs without fear. This audiobook is not about confrontation or control. It is about clarity. It is about learning how to speak from self-respect instead of apology, how to express boundaries without guilt, how to communicate desires without shrinking yourself in the process. Stay with me until the end, because once you understand the psychology behind communication and fear, you will realize that your voice was never the problem. It was the way you were taught to silence it. And that changes today.
Chapter 1: Why Speaking Up Feels So Hard. For many women, the difficulty is not knowing what they need. The difficulty is saying it out loud. The words form clearly in the mind, but somewhere between thought and voice, fear steps in. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of causing conflict, fear of being labeled difficult, emotional, or ungrateful. So the words soften, change shape, or disappear entirely. What remains is silence dressed up as patience. This fear did not appear randomly. It was learned slowly, quietly, over years. Often it began early, when being agreeable was praised more than being honest, when keeping the peace mattered more than expressing discomfort, when saying yes felt safer than explaining why you wanted to say no. Over time, the nervous system learned an important lesson. Harmony equals safety. Expression equals risk. As a result, many women grow into adults who are highly attuned to the emotional states of others, but disconnected from their own. They notice shifts in tone. They sense tension before it is spoken. They anticipate reactions before they happen. This awareness can look like empathy, but beneath it often lives anxiety. The anxiety of managing everyone else's comfort at the expense of their own truth. Speaking up feels hard because the body remembers. Even when the mind knows it is safe, the body reacts as if it is not. The chest tightens, the throat closes, the heart races. This is not weakness, it is conditioning. The nervous system learned that self-expression once came with consequences, and it does not forget easily. Many women confuse this reaction with personal failure. They think something is wrong with them, that they are too sensitive, too afraid, too emotional. But the truth is simpler and kinder. The fear of speaking up is not a flaw. It is a survival response that once made sense. When you grow up in environments where emotions were dismissed, minimized, or punished, silence becomes a form of protection. When honesty was met with withdrawal, anger, or shame, self-expression learned to hide. The body adapted by prioritizing connection over truth. It chose belonging over authenticity. But what protects you in childhood can imprison you in adulthood. As life becomes more complex, the cost of silence increases. Needs go unmet, resentment builds quietly, relationships begin to feel unbalanced. You give more than you receive, you listen more than you are heard, and eventually exhaustion replaces closeness. Yet even then, speaking up still feels dangerous, because fear is no longer tied to a specific person or situation. It becomes generalized. It shows up everywhere, at work, in relationships, with friends, with family. The body reacts before the mind can reason. Another reason speaking up feels hard is because many women were taught that needing something is a burden, that independence means not asking, that strength means enduring quietly. So when a need arises, it comes with guilt attached. You question whether it is valid, whether you are asking for too much, whether you should just handle it yourself.
This internal questioning delays expression. By the time words come out, they are diluted, apologetic, over-explained. The message loses clarity because it is wrapped in fear of rejection. Fear also thrives in uncertainty. Many women do not speak up because they cannot predict the outcome. Will this create distance? Will this start an argument? Will this change how I am seen? The unknown feels more threatening than the discomfort of silence, so silence wins. But silence is not neutral. It is active. It shapes identity. Each time you hold back, you teach yourself that your needs are optional. Each time you minimize your truth, you reinforce the belief that your voice is secondary. Over time, this erodes self-trust. You begin to doubt your own feelings. You second-guess your reactions. You disconnect from your inner guidance, not because it disappeared, but because you stopped listening. The irony is that the fear meant to protect connection often damages it. Unspoken needs create emotional distance. Suppressed feelings turn into quiet resentment. Relationships lose authenticity, and the very closeness you were trying to preserve begins to fade. Speaking up feels hard because it challenges an old agreement you made with yourself, an agreement that said staying quiet keeps you safe. Breaking that agreement feels like stepping into danger even when the present no longer resembles the past. This is why logic alone does not solve the problem. You can tell yourself it's okay to speak, you can understand that healthy communication is important, but until the body feels safe, the fear remains. The first step is not forcing yourself to speak louder. It is understanding why your voice learned to hide. Compassion must come before courage, awareness before action. When you see that your fear is learned, not inherent, something shifts. The fear becomes information instead of identity. You stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What taught me this?" That question opens the door to change. You begin to realize that communication is not about confrontation. It is about alignment. It is about allowing your inner truth to exist in the outer world. It is about trusting that your needs deserve space. This chapter is not about fixing you. There is nothing broken. It is about understanding the roots of your silence so you can gently release them. Because once you see why speaking up feels hard, you stop judging yourself for struggling. And without judgment, growth becomes possible. Your voice was never weak. It was protected. And now it is ready to be reclaimed. Chapter 2. The Cost of Staying Silent. Silence often looks harmless from the outside. It looks like patience, like understanding, like emotional maturity. But inside, silence has weight. It accumulates slowly, moment by moment, until it begins to change how you feel about yourself, your relationships, and your place in the world. The cost of staying silent is not immediate. That is why it is so easy to ignore. But over time, it becomes one of the most expensive habits a woman can carry. When you do not express your needs, your bodies still feel them. The frustration does not disappear simply because you chose not to speak. It settles into your chest. It tightens your shoulders. It shows up as exhaustion you cannot explain. You may tell yourself that you are fine, that it is not a big deal, that you can handle it, but your nervous system keeps score even when your words do not. Each unspoken need becomes a small act of self-abandonment, not dramatic, not obvious, but cumulative. You start prioritizing what others want over what you feel. You adjust, you accommodate, you become flexible in ways that slowly bend you out of shape. And the more you do it, the harder it becomes to recognize where your boundaries even are. One of the first costs of silence is resentment. Not loud resentment, but quiet bitterness that grows underneath kindness. You still show up, you still care, but something inside you starts pulling back. You feel unappreciated, unseen, or taken for granted, yet you struggle to explain why. After all, you never said anything, you never made the request, you never stated the boundary, so the resentment turns inward. This is where self-blame enters. You tell yourself that you should not feel this way, that you are being too sensitive, that other people have it worse. So instead of honoring your feelings, you minimize them. But feelings do not dissolve when dismissed. They intensify. They find new outlets: irritability, emotional distance, sudden outbursts that seem to come out of nowhere. These moments are not random. They are the voice you have been suppressing, finally breaking through. Another cost of staying silent is the erosion of self-trust. When you repeatedly ignore your own needs, you send yourself a message that your inner signals are not important. Over time, you stop listening to them altogether. You become disconnected from your intuition. You second-guess yourself. You wonder whether your feelings are valid or exaggerated. This disconnection makes it even harder to speak up in the future because you no longer feel grounded in your own truth. Silence also reshapes relationships in subtle but powerful ways. When you do not communicate what you need, others fill in the gaps with assumptions. They believe everything is fine. They continue behaving the same way, not because they don't care, but because they don't know. Resentment grows on one side, while confusion grows on the other. Emotional distance replaces intimacy, and both people feel it without fully understanding why. In romantic relationships, silence often masquerades as being easygoing. You tell yourself you don't want to be demanding, you don't want to create conflict, you want to be understanding. But love cannot thrive where needs are hidden. Over time, the relationship becomes unbalanced. One person adapts constantly while the other remains unaware. This imbalance creates emotional fatigue that no amount of patience can fix. In friendships, staying silent can slowly dissolve closeness. You may feel like you are always the one listening, supporting, and showing up, while your own struggles remain unspoken. The friendship begins to feel one-sided. You may withdraw quietly rather than address it directly. And one day, the connection feels distant, not because of one event, but because of many unspoken moments. In professional settings, silence carries another cost. When you do not communicate boundaries, expectations, or needs, you may become overextended. You take on more work than you can manage. You stay late. You say yes when you want to say no. Over time, burnout replaces motivation. And yet, asking for support still feels risky, so the cycle continues. Perhaps the deepest cost of staying silent is the loss of authenticity. When you consistently hide parts of yourself, you begin to feel invisible even when surrounded by people. You are present, but not fully known. You participate, but not honestly. This creates a loneliness that can exist even in close relationships. And the longer this pattern continues, the more it shapes your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who doesn't ask, someone who adapts, someone who endures. This identity feels safe because it is familiar, but it limits your emotional freedom. You stop believing that your needs deserve space. The truth is, silence does not keep relationships safe. It keeps them shallow. It prevents conflict, but it also prevents intimacy. It avoids discomfort, but it also avoids growth. What you don't express cannot be understood, respected, or honored. Many women stay silent because they believe speaking up will make things worse, but often silence is what slowly creates the very outcomes they fear: distance, misunderstanding, disconnection, emotional exhaustion. This chapter is not meant to create regret. It is meant to create clarity. You stayed silent because it once felt necessary, because it felt safer than risking rejection or conflict. That choice deserves compassion, not shame. But awareness opens the door to change. Once you understand the cost of staying silent, you begin to see the value of your voice differently. You realize that speaking up is not selfish, it's self-preserving. It's how you maintain honesty within yourself and within your relationships. Your needs are not problems to be managed quietly. They are signals meant to be expressed. And when you begin honoring them, even gently, something shifts. The resentment softens, the self-trust returns, the relationships begin to realign. Silence protected you once, but it no longer has to define you. Your voice is not the source of conflict, it is the path to connection, and learning to use it is the next step forward. Chapter 3. Understanding the fear beneath the words. Fear does not live in the words you struggle to say. It lives underneath them. Long before your voice hesitates, your body reacts. A tightening in the chest, a knot in the stomach, a sudden urge to stay quiet even when something inside you is asking to be heard. This fear is not random, and it is not a personal flaw. It is a learned response shaped by experience, memory, and meaning. Many women believe they are afraid of speaking up, but what they are truly afraid of is what might happen after. Rejection, disapproval, conflict, being misunderstood, being abandoned emotionally or physically. These fears are rarely about the present moment alone. They are echoes of earlier experiences when expressing a need came with a cost. The mind remembers moments when honesty led to withdrawal, when expressing emotion was met with dismissal, when asking for something resulted in tension or punishment. Even if those moments were small, the nervous system absorbed the lesson. Speaking equals danger. Silence equals safety. Over time, this lesson becomes automatic. The fear activates before conscious thought. You may logically know that the situation is different now, that the person in front of you is not the same as the one who hurt you before, but the body does not operate on logic. It operates on pattern. This is why fear feels irrational and powerful at the same time. It is not trying to tell you the truth about the present. It is trying to protect you based on the past. At the center of this fear is often the fear of rejection. The fear that if you speak honestly, you will be seen differently, loved less, valued less, chosen less. For many women, connection has always felt conditional. Be agreeable, be understanding, be easy to be around. Do not rock the boat. Do not ask for too much. When love feels conditional, needs become dangerous. Another layer of fear comes from the belief that conflict equals loss. Many women learned that disagreement leads to emotional distance, raised voices, or cold silence. So the body learned to avoid conflict at all costs. Even healthy disagreement feels threatening because it reminds the nervous system of instability. But conflict itself is not the danger. Unresolved conflict is. Silence avoids immediate discomfort, but creates long-term emotional fracture. Fear convinces you that staying quiet keeps peace, but in reality, it often delays healing. There is also the fear of being misunderstood, of expressing yourself clearly and still not being heard. This fear is especially strong in women who have tried to speak up before and felt ignored or invalidated. After enough of those experiences, the mind starts asking, what is the point? This is where fear turns into resignation. You stop trying not because you do not care, but because caring feels painful. Another fear beneath the words is the fear of being seen as selfish. Many women were taught that prioritizing themselves meant taking something away from others, that having needs made them demanding, that asking for space or support was a burden. So needs were reframed as flaws to manage privately rather than truths to express openly. This belief creates deep inner conflict. You feel something strongly, but you judge yourself for feeling it. The result is hesitation, overthinking, emotional paralysis. Fear also grows when you feel unsure of your right to ask. If you doubt your worth, your needs will always feel negotiable. If you question whether you deserve consideration, you will soften your requests until they barely exist. This is not a confidence issue. It is a self-trust issue. Self-trust erodes when you consistently override your inner signals. Each time you ignore discomfort, your body learns that your voice does not protect you. Over time, fear grows stronger because it no longer trusts you to listen. Understanding the fear beneath the words requires curiosity instead of judgment. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" ask, "What am I protecting myself from?" This shift changes everything. Fear becomes information rather than an obstacle. You begin to notice patterns, situations where your voice disappears, people around whom you feel small, topics that trigger silence. These patterns reveal the shape of your fear. And once fear is named, it loses power. Fear thrives in vagueness. Clarity weakens it. You may discover that your fear is not about speaking at all, but about losing connection, about disappointing someone, about being perceived as difficult. When you see this, you can begin addressing the real concern rather than fighting yourself. Fear also softens when you understand that it is trying to protect you, not sabotage you. It developed to keep you safe when you didn't have other tools. Thanking it rather than fighting it creates inner cooperation. The nervous system relaxes when it feels understood. This does not mean you obey fear. It means you lead it gently. You reassure yourself that you are no longer powerless, that you can handle discomfort, that your voice does not endanger you, that expressing a need does not equate abandonment. These reassurances take time to settle. Fear does not disappear instantly, but with repetition, the body learns a new truth. Expression can be safe, needs can be honored, conflict can be navigated. The goal of this chapter is not to eliminate fear, it is to understand it, because fear that is understood no longer controls you from the shadows. When you see the fear beneath your silence, compassion replaces shame. You stop forcing yourself to speak and start supporting yourself to feel safe. And from safety, voice naturally returns. You do not become louder, you become clearer. You do not become aggressive, you become grounded. You do not push past fear, you walk through it with awareness. This is the beginning of fearless communication, not the absence of fear, but the presence of understanding. And once you understand the fear beneath the words no longer feel so heavy. They begin to feel possible. They begin to feel yours. And that is where your voice truly begins to come back to life. Chapter 4: The Difference Between Asking and Apologizing. Many women believe they are communicating their needs, but what they are often doing instead is apologizing for having them. The words come out carefully softened, wrapped in explanations, preceded by guilt, and followed by reassurance. "I am sorry to bother you. I hope this is okay. I do not want to be difficult, if it is not too much trouble." By the time the need is finally spoken, it has been reduced to something small, negotiable, and easy to dismiss. This pattern does not come from weakness. It comes from conditioning. Somewhere along the way, you learned that asking directly felt risky, while apologizing felt safer. Apology became a bridge between your truth and other people's comfort. It allowed you to express something without fully claiming it. But there is a fundamental difference between asking and apologizing, and that difference shapes how your message is received and how you feel after you speak. Asking is an act of self-respect. Apologizing is often an act of self-protection. When you ask for something, you are stating a need and trusting that it deserves space. You are not demanding a specific outcome. You are simply making your inner experience visible. When you apologize for a need, you are signaling that the need itself might be wrong, inconvenient, or burdensome. The body feels this difference immediately. Asking feels grounding. Apologizing feels shrinking. Many women apologize not because they believe they have done something wrong, but because they are afraid of being perceived as wrong. They preemptively take responsibility for the discomfort they imagine their honesty might cause. This shifts the emotional balance of the conversation before it even begins. Instead of two people meeting as equals, one person is already minimizing themselves. Apologetic communication often sounds polite, but underneath, it carries anxiety. The tone is cautious, the posture is defensive, the message is diluted by fear of rejection. Even when the words are clear, the energy behind them asks for permission to exist, and permission is not what your needs require. When you apologize for expressing yourself, you teach others how to respond. You signal that your needs are optional, that they can be postponed, that they can be ignored without consequence. Most people do not consciously intend to take advantage of this, but human beings respond to cues. When a need is presented with certainty, it is more likely to be respected. When it is presented with apology, it is more likely to be negotiated away. This pattern also affects how you feel afterward. When you ask clearly, regardless of the outcome, you feel aligned with yourself. You spoke your truth. You honored your inner experience. When you apologize, even if you get what you asked for, you often feel uneasy. You replay the conversation. You wonder if you said too much. You worry that you were annoying. The nervous system stays activated because it never felt fully safe. Apology in this context becomes a form of emotional insurance. You are trying to soften the impact of your honesty in advance, but this insurance comes at a cost. Each time you apologize for a need, you reinforce the belief that your voice requires justification. It is important to understand that this does not mean never apologizing. Apologies have a place when harm has been done, but a need is not harm. A boundary is not harm. A feeling is not harm. Treating them as such distorts communication and self-perception. Asking is not aggressive. Asking is honest. It is clear. It is rooted in self-trust. You are not responsible for how others feel about your needs. You are responsible for expressing them with integrity. Many women worry that asking directly will create conflict, but often what creates tension is confusion. Apologetic language creates ambiguity. The listener is unsure how important the request is. They sense hesitation. They may not realize how much it matters. Clear asking reduces confusion. It sets emotional expectations. The shift from apologizing to asking begins internally. Before changing your words, you must change your relationship with your needs. You must stop seeing them as inconveniences and start seeing them as information, signals that tell you what you require to feel safe, respected, and balanced. When you believe your needs are valid, your language changes naturally. You no longer feel the urge to justify. You speak with calm clarity. You allow space for response without shrinking yourself. Asking sounds like, I need more time. I need support with this. I am not comfortable with that. This matters to me. These statements are not accusations. They are expressions of inner truth. The fear that arises when you stop apologizing is real. It may feel exposed at first, vulnerable, but vulnerability is not weakness. It is alignment. When your words match your inner experience, your body relaxes. Even if the response isn't perfect, you feel grounded because you showed up as yourself. Apologizing for your needs keeps you emotionally safe in the short term, but disconnected in the long term. Asking reconnects you with yourself. It builds self-trust. It teaches your nervous system that honesty does not equal danger. This chapter is not asking you to become confrontational. It is inviting you to become clear, to replace unnecessary apology with presence, to let your needs stand on their own without defense. When you stop apologizing for existing emotionally, something shifts. Your voice steadies, your posture changes, your relationships begin to recalibrate. Some people will respond positively, others may struggle. That reaction is not a reflection of your worth, it is a reflection of what they were accustomed to. Asking does not guarantee that your needs will always be met, but it guarantees that you will no longer abandon yourself to maintain comfort, and that is a profound form of self-respect. Your needs do not require permission to exist, they require courage to be spoken. And the moment you replace apology with clarity, your communication begins to transform. not because you are louder, but because you are finally standing in your truth. Chapter 5. Learning to speak from self-respect. Self-respect is not something you demand from others. It is something you practice within yourself first. The way you speak, the way you pause, the way you hold your ground emotionally, all reflect how much value you place on your own inner world. For many women, communication has been shaped by the desire to be liked, accepted, or understood. Self-respect asks a different question. It asks whether you are being honest with yourself while you speak. Speaking from self-respect does not mean becoming rigid or cold. It means becoming aligned. Your words, tone, and intention begin to match what you actually feel. There is less performance and more presence, less explanation and more clarity. When you speak from self-respect, you are no longer trying to earn permission for your needs. You are simply acknowledging them. Many women struggle with this because self-respect was never modeled clearly. They were praised for being accommodating, flexible, and emotionally available. They were rewarded for understanding others before understanding themselves. Over time, this created a habit of outward focus. What do they need? How will this be received? How can I keep things smooth? Self-respect requires a return inward. It begins by noticing how you feel before you speak, not rushing to fill silence, not immediately adjusting your words to manage reactions, simply checking in with yourself. What am I actually feeling? What do I need right now? This pause is powerful. It shifts you from reaction to intention. When you speak from self-respect, you do not abandon your emotional truth mid-sentence. You do not soften your needs out of fear. You do not over-explain to make yourself easier to accept. You trust that your experience has value, even if it creates discomfort. This trust changes the quality of your voice. You may not speak louder, but you speak steadier. Your tone becomes grounded rather than tentative. Your words become simpler rather than defensive. There is less urgency to convince and more confidence in expression. Self-respect also changes how you handle disagreement. When you are rooted in self-respect, disagreement does not feel like rejection. It feels like difference. You can allow someone else to have a response without collapsing or apologizing for your position. You remain open without shrinking. This is where many women get stuck. They believe self-respect will damage connection, that being firm will push people away. But what damages connection most deeply is self-betrayal. When you repeatedly silence yourself to maintain harmony, you lose authenticity. And without authenticity, connection becomes fragile. Speaking from self-respect actually strengthens relationships over time. It creates clarity. It reduces resentment. It allows others to know you fully rather than interact with a filtered version of you. People may not always agree with your needs, but they will understand where you stand. Self-respect also involves letting go of outcomes. When you speak to be approved, your nervous system stays activated. You watch for reactions. You replay conversations. You judge yourself afterward. When you speak from self-respect, your responsibility ends with honesty. You release control over how it lands. This release is not indifference, it is emotional maturity. You recognize that your job is to communicate clearly, not to manage someone else's emotions. One of the most challenging parts of this shift is tolerating the discomfort that comes with it. Speaking from self-respect may feel unfamiliar at first. The body may interpret it as risk. Old fears may rise. You may feel exposed. This does not mean you are doing it wrong. It means you are doing something new. With practice, your nervous system begins to learn that self-respect does not lead to catastrophe, that expressing yourself does not equal abandonment, that you can survive moments of tension and remain intact. This learning happens through repetition. Each time you speak honestly and stay present afterward, you strengthen self-trust. Each time you resist the urge to over-explain, you reinforce your worth. Each time you hold your grounds with calm clarity, your confidence deepens. Self-respect also changes how you handle disagreement. When you are rooted in self-respect, disagreement does not feel like rejection. It feels like difference. You can allow someone else to have a response without collapsing or apologizing for your position. You remain open without shrinking. This is where many women get stuck. They believe self-respect will damage connection, that being firm will push people away. But what damages connection most deeply is self-betrayal. When you repeatedly silence yourself to maintain harmony, you lose authenticity. And without authenticity, connection becomes fragile. Speaking from self-respect actually strengthens relationships over time. It creates clarity. It reduces resentment. It allows others to know you fully rather than interact with a filtered version of you. People may not always agree with your needs, but they will understand where you stand. Self-respect also involves letting go of outcomes. When you speak to be approved, your nervous system stays activated. You watch for reactions, you replay conversations, you judge yourself afterward. When you speak from self-respect, your responsibility ends with honesty. You release control over how it lands. This release is not indifference, it is emotional maturity. You recognize that your job is to communicate clearly, not to manage someone else's emotions. One of the most challenging parts of this shift is tolerating the discomfort that comes with it. Speaking from self-respect may feel unfamiliar at first. The body may interpret it as risk. Old fears may rise. You may feel exposed. This does not mean you are doing it wrong. It means you are doing something new. With practice, your nervous system begins to learn that self-respect does not lead to catastrophe, that expressing yourself does not equal abandonment, that you can survive moments of tension and remain intact. This learning happens through repetition. Each time you speak honestly and stay present afterward, you strengthen self-trust. Each time you resist the urge to over-explain, you reinforce your worth. Each time you hold your grounds with calm clarity, your confidence deepens. Self-respect also changes how you listen. You no longer absorb everything as your responsibility. You listen with openness without losing yourself. You stay curious without becoming self-erasing. This balance creates healthier communication dynamics. You begin to notice when conversations feel reciprocal and when they feel draining. You become more selective with your emotional investment, not out of withdrawal, but out of wisdom. Another important element of speaking from self-respect is naming your needs without judgment. You do not criticize yourself for having them. You do not minimize them. You treat them as neutral information. This removes shame from the conversation. Needs are not demands. They are expressions of what allow you to feel safe, respected, and present. When you frame them this way internally, your communication becomes more grounded externally. You may also notice that as you grow in self-respect, some relationships shift. This can feel unsettling. People who were accustomed to your silence may struggle with your clarity. This is not a sign that you are wrong. It is a sign that dynamics are adjusting. You are allowed to outgrow roles that required you to shrink. Self-respect does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop disappearing. It means you bring your full self into the room and trust that the right connections will meet you there. Over time, this way of speaking becomes natural. You no longer rehearse every sentence. You no longer brace yourself before expressing a need. You speak with calm confidence because you are no longer divided inside. This integration is powerful. When your inner experience and outer expression align, your body relaxes, anxiety decreases, resentment fades, communication becomes less exhausting. You begin to feel at home in your own voice. This chapter is about reclaiming that voice from a place of dignity rather than defense. It is about learning that self-respect is not something you earn by being agreeable. It is something you embody by being honest. When you speak from self-respect, you honor yourself regardless of the outcome, and that honor becomes the foundation for every boundary, every conversation, and every connection that follows. Your voice does not need to fight for validation, it only needs to be true. And when you allow it to be true, you step into a level of communication that is not only fearless, but free. Chapter 6: How to Express Needs Without Creating Conflict. For many women, the fear of speaking up is not rooted in the belief that their needs are unimportant. It is rooted in the fear that expressing them will create tension, arguments, or emotional distance. Conflict feels like a threat to connection, so silence feels like protection. But this belief misunderstands what conflict actually is and how healthy communication truly works. Conflict is not created by needs. It is created by misunderstanding, misalignment, and unspoken emotion. When needs are expressed with clarity and presence, they reduce tension rather than create it. The problem is not speaking up. The problem is how fear shapes the way communication happens. Expressing needs without creating conflict begins with intention. Before speaking, it is important to ask yourself why you're speaking. Are you trying to be heard or are you trying to be understood? These are not the same. Being heard often comes from urgency. Being understood comes from clarity. When you approach a conversation from the desire to be understood, your tone naturally softens. You are not attacking, you are explaining your inner experience. This shift alone changes how your words land. One of the most powerful tools in conflict-free communication is ownership, speaking from your own experience rather than assigning blame. This means using language that reflects your feelings and needs instead of focusing on what the other person is doing wrong. When you say, "I feel overwhelmed when this happens," or "I need more support in this situation," you invite understanding rather than defensiveness. Defensiveness arises when people feel accused. Clarity arises when people feel informed. Another key element is timing. Many conflicts escalate not because of what is said, but because of when it is said. Expressing needs in moments of high emotional intensity increases the chance of misunderstanding. When emotions are regulated, communication flows more easily. This does not mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means choosing moments where both people have the capacity to listen. Waiting for calm is not avoidance, it is strategy. Your body also communicates as much as your words. When you speak with grounded posture, steady breath, and calm tone, your nervous system signals safety. The other person's body responds to that signal, whether they realize it or not. Calm invites calm. This is why emotional regulation matters so deeply. When you stay present in your body, your communication remains clear. When you are overwhelmed internally, even gentle words can sound sharp. Another common source of conflict is over-explanation. Many women feel the need to justify their needs in detail, hoping that logic will make them acceptable. But over-explaining often creates confusion rather than clarity. It shifts the focus from what you need to defending why you need it. Expressing needs does not require a long explanation. It requires honesty. Simple statements grounded in self-respect are often the most effective. "I need more time. I am not comfortable with that. This matters to me." Simplicity reduces conflict. Listening is equally important. Conflict-free communication is not one-sided. It is a dialogue. When you express a need, allow space for the other person to respond, not to interrupt or defend, but to understand their perspective. Listening does not mean agreeing. It means staying open. When both people feel heard, tension naturally decreases. Even when solutions are not immediate, mutual understanding builds trust. It is also important to release the belief that conflict means failure. Discomfort is not danger. Disagreement is not abandonment. Healthy relationships include moments of friction. What matters is how those moments are handled. When you express needs with respect, you give the relationship an opportunity to grow. You replace guesswork with clarity. You replace resentment with honesty. There may be times when the other person reacts poorly. This does not mean you communicated incorrectly. It means they are responding from their own patterns. Your responsibility is not to control their reaction. It is to remain aligned with yourself. Staying grounded during another person's emotional response is challenging, but it is powerful. It communicates emotional strength. It shows that you trust your voice enough to stand by it. Conflict often escalates when one person tries to manage the other's feelings. When you allow space for emotion without absorbing it, you maintain clarity. You do not retreat. You do not attack. You stay present. This presence de-escalates tension more effectively than argument ever could. Expressing needs without creating conflict also means being willing to accept outcomes that are not perfect. Communication does not guarantee immediate agreement. It guarantees honesty. It creates the conditions for resolution, not control. When you release the need to force understanding, conversations soften. Over time, as you practice this approach, something shifts. Your fear of conflict decreases. You trust your ability to navigate discomfort. You stop equating emotional tension with danger. Your voice becomes steadier because you no longer expect chaos when you speak. This steadiness changes relationship dynamics. Others learn that your honesty does not come with attack, that your needs are expressed with clarity, that conversations with you are grounded rather than volatile. Trust builds, and trust is the foundation of safety. This chapter is not about avoiding conflict, it is about transforming it, turning moments of tension into opportunities for understanding, turning fear into clarity, turning silence into connection. You are not responsible for preventing discomfort at all costs. You are responsible for showing up honestly and respectfully. When you express your needs with intention, presence, and self-respect, conflict loses its power. Communication becomes a bridge rather than a battlefield, and through that bridge, deeper connection becomes possible. Your voice does not destroy relationships, it strengthens the ones that are meant to grow with you, and learning how to speak without fear is learning how to trust that truth.
Chapter 7. Setting Boundaries Without Guilt. For many women, boundaries are not difficult because they are unclear. They are difficult because they feel wrong. Saying no triggers guilt. Creating limits feels selfish. Protecting time, energy, or emotional space can feel like a betrayal of who you were taught to be. So instead of setting boundaries clearly, you negotiate with yourself. You overextend. You tolerate discomfort. You wait until resentment builds and then wonder why you feel drained. Guilt is not a sign that a boundary is wrong. It is a sign that you were conditioned to prioritize others over yourself. From an early age, many women learned that love meant availability, that kindness meant accommodation, that being good meant being easy to be around. Boundaries threatened those identities. They suggested separation where harmony was expected. So the nervous system learned to associate limits with danger, with rejection, with loss of connection. This is why guilt shows up immediately when you try to protect yourself. It is not a moral signal. It is a conditioned emotional response. Understanding this distinction is essential. Guilt is often mistaken for truth. You feel bad, so you assume you are doing something bad. But feelings are not facts. They are messages shaped by past experiences. When you recognize guilt as conditioning rather than evidence, it loses its authority. Boundaries are not punishments. They are instructions. They teach others how to treat you, and they teach you how to honor yourself. When you avoid boundaries, you send an unspoken message that your comfort is flexible, that your limits are negotiable, that your energy is endlessly available. Most people will not question this. They will accept what is offered, not out of cruelty, but out of assumption. This is how resentment grows quietly. You give more than you can sustain. You stay silent longer than you should. You ignore your own discomfort until it becomes impossible to ignore. Then guilt shifts into anger. But anger is simply the boundary that was never spoken. Setting boundaries early prevents emotional explosion later. One of the reasons guilt feels so intense is because boundaries challenge your internal narrative. You may believe that being loving means being self-sacrificing, that being supportive means being endlessly patient, that being understanding means tolerating what hurts you. But love that requires self-erasure is not love, it is survival. Healthy boundaries do not remove connection. They create conditions for honest connection. They allow you to show up fully rather than resentfully. They protect the parts of you that cannot thrive under constant pressure. Boundaries also reveal who respects you. Not everyone will respond well to limits. Some people benefit from your lack of them. When boundaries are introduced, discomfort may arise.
This discomfort does not mean the boundary is wrong. It means the dynamic is changing. Change often feels like loss before it feels like alignment. When guilt appears, the instinct is to retreat, to explain, to apologize, to soften the boundary until it barely exists. But this teaches your nervous system that guilt is a signal to self-abandon. Instead, pause, breathe, stay present. Let the guilt exist without obeying it. Guilt will rise. Guilt will peak. Guilt will fall. You do not need to eliminate guilt to set boundaries. You need to tolerate it. Each time you hold a boundary and survive the discomfort, your nervous system learns something new, that limits do not destroy connection, that you are safe even when others are disappointed, that your needs do not make you unlovable. This learning builds emotional strength. Boundaries spoken calmly are powerful. They do not require justification. They do not require defense. They sound like, I am not available for that. I need time to rest. I am not comfortable with this. This does not work for me. These statements are not aggressive. They are clear. Clarity reduces guilt over time. Another source of guilt is the fear of being misunderstood. You may worry that others will see you as cold, selfish, or uncaring, but you cannot control how others interpret your boundaries. You can only control how honestly you express them. When boundaries are set with respect and consistency, misunderstanding fades. Patterns become clear. Others learn what to expect. And if someone consistently refuses to respect your boundaries, that information is valuable. It tells you where safety exists and where it does not. Boundaries are also an act of self-trust. Each time you honor your limit, you reinforce the belief that you matter, that your body and emotions deserve care. This belief reshapes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who must endure everything. You begin seeing yourself as someone who chooses wisely. This shift changes how you move through the world. You become less reactive, less resentful, more grounded. Guilt loses its grip as self-respect grows. It is important to understand that setting boundaries does not mean you stop caring. It means you care enough to be honest. It means you value connection enough to protect it from resentment. You are allowed to say no without explaining your entire history. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to protect your peace. The fear that boundaries will push people away often masks a deeper truth. Boundaries push away what cannot respect you. They strengthen what can. This is not loss. It is refinement. As you practice setting boundaries, your communication becomes simpler. Your emotional load lightens. You feel less conflicted inside. You begin to trust yourself more. And with that trust, guilt transforms into confidence. Not loud confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that knows its worth without proving it. This chapter is not about becoming rigid. It's about becoming honest, about releasing the belief that your needs are negotiable, about learning that care does not require self-sacrifice. You do not need to earn rest. You do not need to justify limits. You do not need to apologize for protecting your well-being. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors. They show others how to enter your life with respect. And when you stop fearing guilt and start listening to yourself, those doors open to healthier connection. This is how you reclaim your energy. This is how you protect your peace. This is how you learn that saying no is not rejection. It is self-respect spoken clearly. And that clarity changes everything. Chapter 8. Staying grounded when emotions rise. Emotions do not ask for permission before they appear. They rise suddenly, often in the very moments you need clarity the most. Your heart races, your throat tightens, your thoughts scatter, and the urge to either shut down or over-explain takes over. For many women, this is the exact moment when communication collapses, not because they lack words, but because their body feels unsafe. Staying grounded when emotions rise is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about learning how to remain present inside your body while those feelings move through you. Emotional grounding is the difference between reacting from fear and responding from self-respect. When emotions rise, the nervous system shifts into protection mode. It prepares you to avoid danger, even when the danger is emotional rather than physical. This is why your voice may shake, your mind may go blank, or your instinct may be to retreat. Your body believes it is protecting you. The goal is not to fight this response. The goal is to guide it. Grounding begins with awareness. The moment you notice emotional intensity building, pause internally. Do not rush to speak, do not rush to fix. Simply notice what is happening in your body, the tightness, the heat, the pressure. Naming these sensations without judgment immediately creates space between you and the emotion. You are no longer inside the feeling, you are observing it. Your breath is the fastest way back to the present moment. Slow, steady breathing sends a signal of safety to your nervous system. It tells your body that you are not under threat. With each calm breath, the intensity begins to soften, not disappear, but settle enough for clarity to return. You are not calming down to make others comfortable. You are grounding yourself so you can remain aligned. Another powerful grounding tool is physical awareness. Feel your feet against the floor, your back against the chair, the weight of your body supported by something solid. This anchors you in the present and pulls you out of spiraling thoughts. Emotions feel overwhelming when the mind runs ahead of the body. Grounding brings them back together. Many women fear that if they pause, they will lose their chance to be heard. But grounding does not silence you, it strengthens you. A grounded response carries more weight than an emotional reaction ever could. When you speak from a grounded place, your words come out clearer, your tone steadier, your message more direct. You are no longer speaking to relieve anxiety, you are speaking to express truth. Staying grounded also means allowing emotion to exist without letting it drive the conversation. You can feel nervous and still speak clearly. You can feel sad and still set a boundary. You can feel anger and still remain respectful. Emotions do not need to be eliminated to be managed. Another key part of grounding is permission. Many women judge themselves for feeling emotional. They tell themselves they are overreacting or being dramatic. This self-judgment intensifies the emotional response. Acceptance softens it. Say internally, I am allowed to feel this. This feeling makes sense. When you stop fighting the emotion, it loses urgency. It no longer needs to shout to be heard. Grounding also involves slowing down the pace of the conversation. Emotional escalation often happens when communication moves too quickly. You feel pressured to respond immediately. Give yourself permission to pause. Silence is not failure, it is regulation. A simple pause can prevent a conversation from spiraling. You are allowed to say, I need a moment. You are allowed to breathe before responding. You are allowed to come back to a conversation when you feel more centered. This does not weaken your position, it protects it. Staying grounded does not mean you will never feel overwhelmed. It means you recover faster. You return to yourself more quickly. You trust that you can handle emotional waves without being swept away. This trust builds over time. Each time you stay present during emotional intensity, your nervous system learns that expression does not equal danger, that you can feel deeply and remain safe. This learning creates emotional resilience. You begin to notice that situations that once triggered panic now feel manageable. Your body responds with less intensity. Your thoughts stay clearer. You feel more in control of your voice. Grounding also changes how others respond to you. When you remain steady, Others often soften. Your calm presence invites calm. Your clarity reduces defensiveness. Even difficult conversations feel less threatening. This is not because you are managing others. It is because grounded energy creates safety. Staying grounded also allows you to stay connected to your needs while emotions rise. You do not lose sight of what matters. You do not abandon yourself mid-conversation. You remain anchored in your intention. This anchoring is powerful. It prevents regret. It prevents emotional whiplash. It allows you to leave conversations feeling aligned rather than drained. Over time, grounding becomes instinctive. You no longer panic when emotions rise. You recognize the sensation and respond with presence. Your body learns that it can handle intensity without collapse. This is emotional maturity. It is not about control, it is about cooperation with your inner world. When you learn to stay grounded, fear loses its grip, anxiety loses its urgency, your voice becomes reliable again. You no longer disappear when emotions rise, you stay, and staying is the foundation of fearless communication. This chapter is about learning that your emotions are not obstacles, they are signals. When you listen without surrendering to them, they guide rather than overwhelm. You are not meant to be emotionless, you are meant to be embodied. When you stay grounded, your emotions do not silence you, they support you. They inform your voice rather than replacing it. And from that grounded place, your communication becomes calm, clear, and powerful. Not because the emotion vanished, but because you learned how to stand steady while it moved through you. Chapter 9. Being heard without raising your voice. Many women believe that to be heard, they must become louder, firmer, or more forceful. They imagine that clarity requires intensity and that respect is earned through volume or repetition. But the truth is quieter and far more powerful. Being heard is not about how loudly you speak. It is about how clearly you exist in your words. Raising your voice often comes from desperation rather than confidence. It happens when you feel unseen, ignored, or dismissed. The body reacts by pushing harder, hoping intensity will finally break through. But intensity can trigger defensiveness. It can shift the focus from what you are saying to how you are saying it, and suddenly the message is lost. Being heard without raising your voice begins with presence. Presence is the feeling that you are fully there, grounded in your body, aligned with your words, and not asking for permission to exist. When you speak from presence, people feel it. They sense that you are not trying to convince or perform. You are stating something that matters to you. Presence comes before words. If your body is tense, your breath shallow, your mind racing, your message will carry that instability. When you ground yourself first, your voice naturally steadies. You may speak softly, but your words carry weight because they are anchored. One of the most important elements of being heard is pacing. Speaking slowly is often mistaken for weakness, but it is a sign of confidence. When you slow your pace, you give your words space to land. You show that you are not afraid of silence. Silence, when held calmly, commands attention. People listen more carefully when you do not rush. Another powerful factor is simplicity. Many women over-explain because they fear being misunderstood. They add details, justifications, and context in an attempt to make their needs acceptable. But over-explanation often dilutes the message. It invites debate rather than understanding. Clear communication is concise. It focuses on what matters most. It does not hide behind excessive detail. When you state your needs simply and calmly, it is harder to dismiss. Being heard also depends on emotional alignment. If your words say one thing but your energy says another, people sense the disconnect. For example, saying "I am fine" while your body communicates tension creates confusion. Saying "I need this" while apologizing sends mixed signals. Alignment means your words match your inner truth. When they do, your communication feels authentic. Authenticity invites respect. Another reason women feel unheard is because they wait until frustration overflows. Needs go unspoken for too long, and when they finally emerge, they come out with emotional charge. The listener hears the emotion first and the message second. Speaking earlier changes this dynamic. When needs are expressed calmly and consistently, they do not accumulate emotional weight. They remain easier to hear and respond to. Being heard without raising your voice also involves trusting yourself enough to stop repeating. Repetition often comes from doubt. You repeat because you are unsure whether your message has value. When you trust that what you said matters, you allow space for response. You do not chase validation. Listening plays a crucial role here as well. When you listen attentively, others feel respected. This respect is often returned. Communication becomes reciprocal rather than competitive. Being heard is not about winning, it is about connection. There will be moments when you are clear and calm and still not heard. This can be painful, but it is important to understand that being unheard does not always mean you communicated poorly. Sometimes it means the other person is not ready or willing to listen. Your voice does not lose value because someone fails to receive it. Knowing this protects you from self-doubt. You can remain grounded even when the outcome is not what you hoped for. You do not need to escalate to be valid. Being heard without raising your voice also means choosing your moments wisely. Not every situation requires immediate expression. Timing matters. When people are overwhelmed, distracted, or defensive, even clear communication can miss its mark. Choosing moments of openness increases the chance of connection. This choice is not silence, it is discernment. As you practice these principles, you may notice a shift in how people respond to you. They interrupt less, they ask questions, they take your words more seriously, not because you changed who you are, but because you changed how you inhabit your voice. Your calm confidence invites attention. This does not mean you never express strong emotion, it means you express it without losing yourself. Anger can be communicated calmly. Sadness can be expressed without collapse. Firm boundaries can be stated without aggression. Strength does not require force. When you embody this kind of communication, you stop fearing that you must fight to be heard. You realize that your presence does the work for you. You trust that your voice carries meaning even when it is quiet. This trust is transformative. You stop bracing yourself before speaking. You stop rehearsing every possible reaction. You stop monitoring how you are being perceived. You speak from alignment and let the rest unfold. Being heard without raising your voice is not about controlling the room. It's about grounding yourself within it. When you do that, your words naturally find their place. This chapter is about reclaiming the authority of your calm, about realizing that softness and strength are not opposites, that clarity does not require confrontation, that your voice does not need to shout to matter. You do not need to become louder to be heard. You need to become more rooted in yourself. And when you do, your words begin to land exactly where they are meant to, not because you forced them there, but because they were spoken from truth. And truth, when spoken with presence, always carries weight. Chapter 10. Owning your voice without fear. Owning your voice is not a single moment of bravery. It is a quiet decision you make again and again to stop abandoning yourself in small ways. It is the choice to trust that what you feel matters, that what you need deserves space, and that your voice does not exist to keep the peace at the cost of your truth. Fear does not disappear when you own your voice. It changes shape. It becomes something you walk alongside rather than something that controls your steps. For many women, fear has been the invisible companion in communication. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being judged, fear of being rejected or labeled as difficult. For years, this fear shaped how you spoke, when you spoke, and whether you spoke at all. Owning your voice means acknowledging that fear without allowing it to decide for you. This ownership begins internally. Before your words reach anyone else, they must be claimed inside you. You stop asking whether you are allowed to feel what you feel. You stop negotiating with yourself about whether your needs are valid. You stop shrinking your truth to make it easier for others to accept. This inner shift changes everything. When you own your voice, you speak from alignment rather than urgency. You are no longer trying to prove your worth through explanation. You are not seeking approval through softness. You are simply expressing what is real for you. This expression feels different in the body. There is less tension, less rush, more steadiness. Fear often tells you that speaking up will cost you connection. But what you begin to realize is that silence has already been costing you connection with yourself, and connection with others that requires self-erasure is not connection at all. It is performance. Owning your voice does not mean you become unkind or rigid. It means you become honest. Honesty carries warmth when it is rooted in self-respect. You can be compassionate without being self-sacrificing. You can be clear without being harsh. You can be firm without being cold. This balance is learned through practice. At first, owning your voice may feel uncomfortable. You may feel exposed. You may worry about how others will respond. This discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you are stepping out of old patterns. With time, your nervous system learns that honesty does not equal danger, that expressing yourself does not lead to abandonment, that you can survive moments of tension and remain whole. Each experience reinforces trust in yourself. As you own your voice, you may notice shifts in your relationships. Some people respond with relief. They feel closer because they finally understand you. Others may resist. They were comfortable with the version of you who stayed quiet. This resistance is information, not condemnation. You are not responsible for maintaining relationships that require your silence. Owning your voice also means letting go of the fantasy of perfect communication. You will not always say things perfectly. You may stumble. You may need to clarify. You may feel emotional. This does not mean you have failed. It means you are human. Perfection is not required for authenticity. Fear often tells you to wait until you are calm, confident, and certain before you speak. But confidence is built through action, not waiting. Clarity emerges through expression, not silence. You do not become fearless and then speak. You speak and become less afraid. This is the paradox of voice. When you own your voice, you stop measuring its value by how it is received. You measure it by whether it was honest. This shift frees you from constant self-monitoring. You no longer replay conversations endlessly. You no longer punish yourself for taking up space. You begin to trust that your truth deserves air. Owning your voice also means recognizing that fear may still show up, but it no longer gets the final say. Fear can exist in the room while you speak. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward with it present. You do not need to eliminate fear to be powerful. You need to stop obeying it blindly. As this ownership deepens, communication becomes less exhausting. You feel less split inside. You are no longer managing two realities, the one you feel and the one you present. They merge. This integration brings relief. You begin to feel more grounded in your interactions. You speak with intention. You listen without disappearing. You respond rather than react. You remain present even when conversations are difficult. This presence becomes your strength. Owning your voice changes how you move through the world. You take up space without apology. You express boundaries without guilt. You state needs without justification. You trust that your voice belongs wherever you are. This does not make life conflict-free. It makes it authentic. And authenticity attracts the right kind of connection, the kind that respects your truth, the kind that grows with honesty, the kind that does not require you to shrink. This chapter is not an ending, it is a beginning, a commitment to yourself that you will no longer silence your inner world for the sake of comfort, that you will speak with care, clarity, and courage, that you will honor your needs even when it feels unfamiliar. Your voice does not need permission. It does not need perfection. It does not need approval. It needs ownership. And when you claim it fully, fear loses its power to keep you small. You step forward not as someone trying to be heard, but as someone who knows they deserve to speak. And that knowing becomes the foundation of a life lived with honesty, self-respect, and quiet strength.